girls, it's Mrs. Torres here, and I'm bringing you a home experiment for the water cycle. What we are going to do today is we're going to put together 2 at-home water cycles. One is going to be with some more ice, and one is going to be with some less ice, so we can see the difference in condensation in the water cycle. So my daughter here is holding up the water cycle for us. As you can see, there are 4 main steps that go around in a circle in the water cycle. The first one always starts with the Earth's surface and the runoff, and then that gets lifted up into the ground into evaporation. Then it becomes condensation, which then becomes precipitation, and back to groundwater runoff. And it is a cycle that goes round and round. And every time it rains, boys and girls, and the water evaporates from the ground, it goes back up. Yes,
it starts again.
The cycle starts again. So this experiment comes from our Science 21. We have a picture of what it's going to look like at the end. And then tomorrow we will come back and see if the water evaporated. So Isabella and I are going to put this together for you now.
Yes.
So we're using 2 takeout containers for salad. And we stuck about a half a cup of dirt in each container to simulate the ground and the moisture that comes out of the ground.
We also have some blue food coloring there. I don't really know what we're going to do with that yet, but we're
going to turn the water blue from the blue food coloring so we can make it simulate the ocean. So I have here 2 deli containers. What I'm going to do with the 2 deli containers is, if I follow the experiment, it wants us to move the dirt over. Okay, and then stick the deli container, and then push the dirt around the deli container. So Isabella's going to do the next one. Okay, so it kind of forms a well. Then we're going to take a half a cup of Then we're going to take and then spread it around. Put the deli container in, and then spread the dirt on either side. Okay.
There's the second one.
So then we're going to take a measuring cup now, and we're going to take a half a cup of water, which says 1/2 here, to each container. Okay.
And I'll pour the next one.
Here, wait a second, pour it in.
Yep, I know.
Okay, so now what my daughter was talking about was the blue coloring to simulate the ocean water. We're going to pour in a few drops and make the water turn blue. Okay, so this way we can see the evaporation happening. Okay, then the next step.
It looks kind of pretty.
Yes, it looks very pretty. The next step is very important, the plastic. We're going to take the plastic and we are going to stick it over the water container, and with a tiny piece of tape, we are going to tape it to the side of the container.
Yes.
And we're going to do the same thing repeated with the other container. Now, if you don't have plastic strips at home, I just cut up a Ziploc bag, and as you see, it could sometimes fall in the water, which is fine. Just keep placing it till you can get it to stick on top, and tape it in place.
See, it doesn't matter if it falls, really.
Right, you just tape it in place. So I'm going to tape it in place. Okay, awesome. So now the next step is very important as well. We cover the lid of the container. So Isabella's going to cover that lid for you. And then our final step today is we're going to stick ice cubes on top of this container.
What do you mean?
This bag has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 ice cubes. So it's going to help the water condense and evaporate a lot quicker because it's going to be colder.
Okay,
this one, I'm going to put a few less, and we're going to see if more water evaporates or if less water evaporates. And we're going to see what happens to the water overnight tomorrow when I come back. If the ice cubes melted and if the water has condensed onto the top of the lid. And then we'll see how evaporation works. And then what you're going to do, boys and girls, is in your slide this week for science, you're going to have some questions after watching this video on my experiment. We're going to be asking you to, we're going to ask you to predict what you think is going to happen. I'm just grabbing the questions, boys and girls. We're going to ask you, read them the question.
What happened to the water at the end of 1 hour? What would happen if you use more or less water? And how is this movement of water in your model related to the weather that you observed?
So we're going to be answering those questions in our slide for science this week. So we're going to observe what happens here. We're going to come back in an hour and see what it looks like. Then we're going to come back tomorrow and see what it looks like. And we're going to also see if we can predict what would happen if Miss Torres used less water. If I didn't just use a half a cup, what if I used in my measuring cup here and I only used a quarter of a cup of water?
What's going to happen, actually.
Okay, what do you think?
I think maybe it wouldn't evaporate that much.
Okay, so now you see Isabella made a prediction. You can make predictions too. We'll see you in 1 hour to see what's happened so far. Hi boys and girls, it's Mrs. Torres back again. As you can see, it's 1 hour later. So now if we zoom in close to the water cycles.
One of them is actually kind of evaporation.
Right, so the one with the least amount of ice cubes in it that we had made has more condensation here that is forming. And if you see that the condensation is forming, it is because the water is evaporating and it is creating the condensation from the water in the container, making the water cycle happen. If we leave this overnight like this, it's going to wind up that the blue water will eventually all evaporate and disappear. The one that had more ice is taking
kind of more like it's not that melted, and all the ice is still there, and it's not that condensation more. It's like not melted or anything.
So the one that had more ice, as my daughter was explaining to you, it's still frozen and it didn't get as much condensation as the one with less ice. And it is still taking its time to evaporate the water. But what's happening on the inside, if you can see, zoom in close, is there's a white film on top of the blue plastic water there because the water in this one is actually starting to evaporate. So over time, the evaporation that happens is going to make the water disappear.
I kind of made an observation.
Go ahead.
It's like wet at the top.
Yes, my daughter observed that the plastic bags are kind of cold and wet at the top because the ice is melting. Okay, we'll check back with you tomorrow to see what's going to happen and see if any of the water evaporated overnight. Okay. Hi boys and girls. Mrs. Torres is back 24 hours later with our water cycle. I want to show you how much it has condensed and how much evaporation has happened.
It looks like all the ice melted.
Yes, it did. And the longer we leave it, the more we will see the water evaporate and condense, and then the cycle will happen all over again. So we're going to zoom in on this one. This was the one that we had with the most amount of ice. Yeah. So you can see here on top, I'm going to move the baggie. Look at all the condensation that happened. So all that is the water that is pulling up from the blue water, and it is condensing and evaporating, and then it's dripping back down, if you can see, right onto the plastic.
And that's why there's not that much water in the bag, because it's like kind of condensation.
Right, and that's the water cycle at work. Okay, so I'm going to put this bag back so it can keep condensing. Now this one had the least amount of ice, and we got
it looks like more condensation, but more water than that one. So it looks like it has more condensation, but it didn't really do that much with the water.
This one had more condensation, and you can see that the condensation on top is lifting from the blue water, and it is getting all evaporated up here, and then it is going to be pouring back down. Now, a fun fact, why is the water up here not blue when we dyed the water down there blue? Because the water is being evaporated up, but the food coloring is being left behind. Because food coloring is different from the water being evaporated. So if you were to draw on the ground outside with sidewalk chalk and it was to get wet, it would turn, the water would turn colors of the chalk, and it would not, when it evaporates, it would not rain blue water. because the coloring stays on the ground. The water is what's getting evaporated by the air. So the longer we leave this, the more you're gonna see the water evaporate. And now we're gonna try something different. We're gonna put a light over one of these, and we're gonna come back in a few hours after we put a light, and we're gonna see how long it takes to have more evaporation happen. Okay, we'll see you then.
Go.
Okay, boys and girls, we're back 24 hours later with our experiment. I wanted to show you what happened with the one that was left in the sun versus the one that was not. So the one that was left in the sun, you can see here in the container that there's a lot of condensation and that there's little bubbles at the top where the water is starting to rain back down onto the plastic, because as you can see in the container, the blue water has now evaporated and the dirt looks kind of wet like the dirt outside, because every morning when you go outside and the grass and the dirt are wet, it's because the morning dew has rained down on it. And that is exactly what's happening here. So the longer I leave this, the more it's going to evaporate, and you can see there's blue water and water on top of the plastic, and it's going to continue to evaporate up and then precipitate back down. On the other one that was not left in the sun, you can see that there is still some condensation, there is still some wonderful steam and fog coming up, but the blue water on the inside has not fully evaporated. It is less, definitely, but it is not evaporated completely like the other one has. And that is because when we changed the factor and we added in a new condition, which was heat, the warmer the air, the more condensation is going to happen, and it's going to cause the precipitation. So next time it rains, think about it, and think about how when you have a hot day after it rains, how fast the ground dries up because of the hot sun, and it evaporates and then precipitates back down. Okay, see you on our next experiment.